Earlier we saw that by using Date.now class of Luxon and using the .now function, .now method on it, it's a static method. By using this, you get the current date, right? You get the current date. I'll just print it out. So you get the current date in the Luxon format, and that's an object that gives you data about the current date, right? It gives you milliseconds, it gives you all this data. Now we are going to look at, we also looked at a couple of functions that we get. There are several functions that we get that we can call on date.now. So I can list those down here. I can save this and I can run this function, get all functions. This is a function that I wrote myself that gives me all the methods that this class or this object has access to. So these are all the methods, right? And so we are going to look into each of these one after the other now, right? So going with the first one, right? So diff now. These two are something that starts with underscore underscore, which simply means these are not to be accessed. These are not for general purpose use. These are internally used, right? Constructor is something that is a constructor. It has nothing to do with uh, with it's not a function, it's not a method, it's a constructor for the class, right? To construct the class, construct an object. So we are going to ignore that. Next we are going to come to diff and diff now. Okay, so let's just comment this out. I create an instance of date.now and say I print out now dot diff, right? Let's see. So difference takes another date, right? So I need to pass another date to it. So say I take two dates, right? So I take two dates, now one and now two. Okay, and say I call now to after a little while, right? So that we can see, or even if I type if I call it right after now one, there will be a difference of milliseconds, right? So let me now check the difference. If I want to get the difference in milliseconds, of milliseconds, how will I go about it? So I'll pass now 2 into this. So now one dot diff now 2. Remember, it has to be a Luxon date, so you have to convert everything into Luxon date, right? So now we are dealing with now. That's why I'm using now. You can also pass in a date with date and time to set the value to a specific date in the past or in the future. So let's see what is the difference between these two dates. There will be milliseconds of difference because right after now 1, now 2 is being set. So let me console log that. Let me save this, clear the screen, and run node index.js. Here you can see I returned an object that gives me a lot of data. It gives me there's an object of duration. Duration is a class, another class, and it creates this returns an object of duration, which has got fields values. Values has got milliseconds. This is the difference, minus 35, right? This is the difference. Diff 1 minus now 1 minus now 2 is minus 35 seconds. If I do it now 2 minus now 1, this will be positive 35 or something. Let's try that. So I'm subtracting later date with earlier date. So now I'm getting 35 milliseconds, and that is positive 35 milliseconds, right? Since I'm subtracting later date with earlier date, right? And it takes 35. This also tells me that it takes 35 seconds for this line between execution of these two lines, right? And if I add some delay to it, it will work accordingly. Let's try some delay to it. Set timeout, right? I'll add a delay of 1000 milliseconds, right? and I'll move these two inside of this. Okay, I've got access to. All right, let's run this and see. Let me clear the screen and run this. And there it is. Let's see. This duration, object of duration has got 1055 milliseconds. So set timeout is run after 1000 milliseconds, and remember, set timeout doesn't run accurately at 1000 milliseconds. It gives us a guarantee that it will not run before 1000 milliseconds, but it could take longer than 1000 milliseconds, right? Whatever you pass in here, it will run after that, not on that or before that, right? And that's why we see this 1055 milliseconds of delay. Okay, so that's the number of milliseconds it's taking for second one to execute, and that's the difference we're getting with diff. So date.now.diff is very much useful if you want to uh, subtract get a difference between a date in the future or date in the past with the current date, with the date at the present, at this very moment, right? In that case you can use diff. Similarly, there is diff. There's another function. We are going to look at that in the next video, and that is diff now. So if you have got like in this case we have got two now, we'll be looking at diff now directly. If we have a date, we can use diff. If we do not have a date, we can use diff now. We're going to look at that in the next section.